Okay, good morning, everyone. Last morning together. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I was reflecting around consciousness. It's very interesting reflecting around consciousness. And just thinking about how much, in a way, how much how much detail we need in the map of the mind, and to be helpful to practice. How much detail do we need to stimulate curiosity, stimulate that interest in looking more consistently. I hesitate to say deeply, because I think the depth happens on its own. It happens with consistency, and sometimes we say look deeply and we think that we have to try hard. So I definitely don't want to give that idea, but trying or keeping going with consistency, with that very, very light touch, very, very light effort. It's an ongoing project. It's not something that happens in a week. It's not something that happens. It's a lifetime, like our practice in many other areas, a lifetime. So as Bhante says, we need to learn to enjoy mindfulness for its own sake. If you like, we need to keep noticing what's happening, and in that noticing, hopefully part of what we'll see will be how it benefits the mind to be mindful, and what the differences are between the mind that's unaware and the mind where awareness is working as a positive factor in the mind, influencing the mind, influencing our whole emotional life. So I think how much information, how much sort of more intellectual knowledge we have, or how much we need, will vary, I think, from person to person. So I did want to say a little bit this morning, and just sort of take what you need. So I wanted to talk a bit about the final skandha, consciousness. Maybe just to stress again how it's not really possible to separate out. It's like we can't sort of we don't even know where the mind is to start with, in terms of trying to separate things out. Where the mind doesn't it's not like the brain. There isn't a location, a place, some sort of form. So it becomes even less possible than with something that is a bit more tangible to say, well, there's this strand and there's that strand. I think we can do it as long as we don't take it too literally or too definitively. But sometimes things can generally be said to have certain characteristics or certain sort of functions. And the function of consciousness as a skandha, and consciousness is defined in different ways within the Pali Canon, but also probably within different Buddhist traditions. So consciousness as a skandha in early Buddhism always arises with an object. It's that which it's one of the factors that enables objects to be known, because they arise together. Actually, they arise simultaneously. The object that's being seen or being heard, and the the recognition of it, the knowing of it. So it's a very limited sort of knowing that arises. It's quite different to the more fuller sense of right mindfulness, for example, that knowing that comes along with a sense of interest and even some sense of insight about it, that clearly knowing. So consciousness, on its own, it doesn't feel, it doesn't perceive, it doesn't have that sort of capacity to move forward or to generate an impulse to act in the way that the samskaras, excuse me, do. So it's quite a rudimentary sort of conscious of, quite limited. And so it needs those others. It needs, if you like, perception and feeling and the samskaras as well as form in order to be able to function well. And certainly the early Buddhist model is of consciousness and object arising and passing away very fast. Like waters in a stream is one of the images used. So continually experience and the knowing of it is continually arising, passing away. Below consciousness a lot of the time, but consciousness in a different way, but sort of subterranean. So but the fact that these moments of consciousness and objects arising and passing so fast doesn't allow us to see the process with our usual consciousness, again, or our usual consciousness. So we have the illusion of continuity. And that's partly because consciousness as a skandha provides a sense of subjective cohesiveness. These are Analayo's words, subjective cohesiveness. That sense of I'm the one experiencing all these things. Got a nice little quote from someone called Andrew Olensky, who's a scholar connected with the Barre Center for Buddhist Studies. And he says, objects are always changing. Therefore, consciousness is always moving, tottering, impermanent, changing, and becoming otherwise. In fact, I think he's quoting from the Abhidharma. I think this is the translation from the early Abhidharma. Objects, so experiences, are always changing. Therefore, consciousness is always moving, tottering, impermanent, changing, and becoming otherwise. So it gives you that sense of, nothing to hold on to, nothing to hold on to. An inherent fluidity and instability in objects, and therefore that subjective sense of consciousness, which is knowing. But as I say, we don't generally experience this because it's all happening very fast. I was thinking of the old-fashioned films when I used to go to Saturday morning cinema as a kid sometimes, and you'd get the you'd actually see the sort of film come to it, and but sometimes you used to see the separate frames of a film sort of flickering past really, really fast on a reel. So I think of that stream of consciousness a bit like that arising, rising, arising, arising, and giving us this all important illusion of continuity, giving rise to this sense of not me as a process, but me as a thing, a fixed thing. Yeah, maybe another word, cohesiveness, seamlessness. So the role of mindfulness in relation to all this processing, we can be mindful of this process of consciousness, but it's very subtle. We can at times, be able to be aware of that process of mind arising, passing away, consciousness arising, passing away. I think it's not very easy to do, but perhaps we can get glimpses of it when the mind is very settled, when really soft. So Bhante talks about how mind can contemplate mind. We had the reading earlier in the week. So we can know all these different mental objects, and some of them we've been looking at this week, like the thoughts as mental objects, images in the mind, the different flavors of craving and aversion. And I haven't given them much stress, but the different flavors of the opposites of craving and aversion, different flavors of love or contentment or generosity as they arise as mental factors. And we can also start to be aware of these more subtle factors of mind, as we've been exploring with the skandhas. So how feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. So as I said, these words are all used in quite different ways, and in different traditions, and even within the early Buddhist teaching, sometimes consciousness is just referred to, it means the mind as a whole, the mind in general. But also things change depending on our perspective, perhaps depending on perhaps how stable the awareness is on any particular day, and the level of understanding, the level of insight in the mind. I've got a little reading if I can find it. Okay, so this is Sayadaw U Tejaniya, the Burmese teacher. He says the same phenomena, the same experience, whatever you call it, the same moment, the same mind, the same knowing, the same object. But depending on how developed your understanding is, or whether some other understanding is developing, then your view of the same thing can be very, very different. So what changes is not the objects or the consciousness, but the lens from which we're able to view, and how much that makes my metaphors. Yeah, but how much understanding, how much clear seeing is going on through those Gombrich spectacles. That's what changes everything, and that's why it's the cultivation of the qualities of awareness and wisdom in the mind are so crucial. Yeah, and the continuity, if you like, because the practice doesn't rely on very strong concentration and deep states of samadhi for its effectiveness, it relies on continuous awareness, on continuity of knowing, that allows understanding to build. It allows the mind to fill in the gaps of the picture. It allows it to see the flavor of conditionality in more and more moments. It's a big join the dots picture, and over time the awareness and wisdom are able to function more strongly in the mind and fill in those dots. Or another image I sometimes use is that of a jigsaw puzzle. That just over time, but through continuity of attending. So yeah, we had a question earlier in the week asking about the difference between mindfulness and consciousness, and I said a bit about that, how mindfulness or awareness is. I mean, who knows? They're in some ways probably part of the same insubstantial material, if you like. It's not necessarily a hard and fast dividing line between mindfulness and consciousness, but there is a sense that mindfulness can be cultivated. We can actively choose to give our intention to encouraging mindfulness, encouraging right view and a wisdom perspective. But something that became a bit clearer for me recently on a retreat that I think both Mokshika and I have talked about a little bit, this retreat with Andrea Feller, who is a student of Sayadaw U Tejaniya. And she was talking particularly about the difference between mindfulness and attention and how they work in the mind. And I'm just going to say a little bit about this because I think can be a useful distinction. So attention is a translation of the Pali word is manasikara, and the Sanskrit is manaskara. So this is an omnipresent mental event. Like consciousness is omnipresent. It's there in every moment of experiencing. Whereas mindfulness is not omnipresent. It's quite intermittent, which is why we have to put energy into cultivating it. So Manasikara is, if you like, it's in my mind, I don't know if this is accurate, but this is how I think of it. It's somewhere between the sort of rudimentariness of consciousness and the potential of mindfulness or awareness. It's somewhere between. So attention is when an object of consciousness arises. Some of these objects, attention is drawn towards them. So attention is what moves towards an object and highlights some objects in consciousness, because not all objects that arise with consciousness see the light of day, as it were. It's attention that orients and moves closer to certain objects. So even then, we're not necessarily aware of this process of our attention just going here and there. But with mindfulness, we can become aware of that process of attention moving around. And we've been doing a lot of that this week. In a way, when I talked about awareness accompanying, sometimes I've said attention, I might not have said it all the time, but there's a sense of the attention going places, moving to different objects, highlighting different objects, and we can be with that process or not. It happens either way. It happens sort of below our radar, or it can happen more consciously with mindfulness. So in receptive practice, that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to notice where the attention goes quite naturally, and we follow it, we accompany it. But attention is also used in a way where we consciously direct the attention. And that's what we're doing in a practice like the mindfulness of breathing or the metta bhavana. We're consciously using that quality of attention to direct attention to a particular object again and again, to help build stability of mind, to help build metta and other positive qualities in the mind. So we can have a particular goal in mind and use that faculty of attention to move towards it. Yeah, but what we've been doing is much more of that receptive practice where we just accompany, awareness accompanies attention as much as we can. So mindfulness isn't just in this receptive way, it's not just accompanying, it's also aware of the bigger picture. Because it's settled back, because it's got this broad awareness, it's able to notice, like I say, the bits where the picture fits together with another bit. There's a little understanding that happens. There's an aha moment here. Something becomes clearer. Andrea Feller used this, she talked quite a lot about the shaping process. And I think that's a very useful word in relation to the conditioning that goes on, the processes of cause and effect. That all the time, the different mental factors are shaping our consciousness. They're shaping our being, for want of a better word. Yeah. And we can, mindfulness can be aware of that process, that awareness, that, and in that sense, we, as we were looking at with volition yesterday, there's some sense of influencing the direction or influencing the shape to one that is more free, more kind, more open, and more aligned with the truth of how things are. So simple mindfulness with the right view, this helpful Dharma perspective, one of these helpful ideas that I talked about at the beginning of the week. That simple, it's so simple, isn't it? Just enabling more to be seen. And often what feels like being known is just the same old, the same old. But if there's a freshness, willingness to bring freshness to the moment, then things can be seen, as Utejani was saying in that little reading, in a very different way. So I wanted to just finish by just linking this up a little bit with what I call uncontrived mindfulness or unprompted mindfulness. And so I think once we have the habit of encouraging a mindfulness, encouraging moments of being present to whatever's arising, then we start to develop more continuity of mindfulness, and then we start to develop a bit of momentum. And it becomes easier to see awareness arising on its own. There's less need to remind ourselves, am I aware? What's happening now? In a way to consciously sort of remind ourselves to be present. It becomes more a sense, and you probably noticed this at some points this week, that actually you're already aware. Mindfulness is already present. There's like a coming together of coming to the present, and that instant recognition that awareness is already there. Mindfulness is already there. So then I think it gives us the opportunity to get familiar, or start to get familiar with the flavor of what awareness is like, what mindfulness is like in those moments. We become less, if you like, less sort of glued to the objects, and there's more space around the experience, so that quality of awareness can be recognized a little bit more clearly, a bit more ease. I think it takes quite a lot of releasing of control of where we want our experience to go, or how we want the mind, or how we want awareness to be. It's a really hands-off way of being that, and then we can perhaps just get a again, Andrea Feller talks about the scent of awareness, or the flavor or the taste of the mind that's just noticing what's happening. So it's noticing, but you get the scent of the other side too, the scent of the knowing quality of mind, the awareness, the observing mind, the knowing, however we describe it. And I think different words can be helpful to sort of round out the picture. And sometimes I think this includes what I call panoramic awareness, or global awareness. And my experience has been this has been more available in things like walking meditation when I'm moving. So actually the visual sense is operating, the hearing, touch sensations, and this movement. So there's quite a lot going on. And then I can have a sense that all the senses are awake, and they're all being known. In some ways, this points to the exercise that Mokshika was doing with us a couple of days ago. It might feel that they're being known simultaneous. It might feel that they're being known just in very quick but very light succession. But the mind is settled back from this all. Yeah, so the mind is just watching the senses at play, while also being able to notice how the mind is relating to experience, noting what's happening within the mind. And we can get a strong sense when there's momentum in the mind, and perhaps there's that sense of global mindfulness. We get a sense of how effortless it is. That actually there's momentum that's keeping it going, and there's interest in that just keeps us there, keeps us attending. Keeps this sort of almost impersonal attending. That's very pleasurable, that's very So I think that's all I want to say. I'm going to lead a meditation, or maybe two actually, where we can just explore, if you like, yeah, one of the things to explore perhaps is what I call the comings and goings of mindfulness, where we make a bit less of a distinction between the times when we're mindful and the times when we're not mindful. We clearly know, but we get a bit less hung up on whether we're mindful or not. There can be a bit more, it's a bit like a wave. It has its peaks and it has its troughs, and we don't get freaked out if we're on a peak or if we're in a trough, or want to be on a peak when we're in a trough. There's just a rhythm. There's a rhythm of mind. And in a way, the less grabby we can be about the times when awareness is present, then the more we allow that rhythm to surface, and for mindfulness to re-arise. Okay, so maybe let's just have a minute or so leg stretch, a couple of minutes leg stretch, and then we'll sit. Oops. Just taking a few minutes to tune in with just how you are in this moment. Not necessarily through active looking, but just allowing how you are, how things are, to be known. Known through different sense experiences. Checking in with the body and the physical senses. Checking in with the mind. What's the feeling in the mind right now? Not needing an answer. But just to encourage that sense of being with, accompanying whatever is happening. The feeling in the mind can be a very helpful object to stay with, either as an anchor for experience or just following how it subtly changes. You might notice some location in response to the idea of the feeling, how the mind feels. Maybe a physical location. We're letting mind and body stay relaxed and open, not focusing down any particular area, staying quite broad. What's the feeling in the mind right now? And noticing feeling as an object, being known in the mind, being known by awareness. And perhaps that awareness, that knowing mind has a particular quality or flavor at the moment. Getting familiar with how awareness feels in the mind, in the body. The scent of awareness that's relaxed, impartial, able to notice whatever's happening with some degree of ease and contentment, curiosity. And especially if the mind feels quite calm, not so many objects, you might drop in a question, not looking for an answer, but like dropping a pebble into a pond, seeing the ripples. You might ask, what is the mind knowing? Or how do I know I'm aware? Or you might particularly notice the moments when mindfulness re-arises. There's that coming again into the present moment. Really enjoying and appreciating that moment. Mindfulness back again. What's that like? Start to see how often mindfulness re-arises. If we can get out of our own way, let the mind be simple, simple presence. There might be a lot going on in the mind that's quite complex, but the awareness of it can be very simple. Simply knowing. Knowing what you know with as little effort as possible. Really lightly touching the object, recognizing the awareness. Or there might be a sense of listening around awareness. Space of silence around objects. Spaciousness in the mind. Awareness might be knowing objects or knowing awareness itself, and either is fine. Noticing any sense of pleasure from awareness of being in the present moment. Noticing any sense of appreciating awareness, appreciating the mind for being willing to do this work. So if there are any comments or anything that you noticed in that practice that you'd like to share. Okay, Vajradevi just needs to Vajradevi's fiddling with the tank.
Rachel's got a question.
Rachel has a question. One of our three Rachels.
Well, it was very interesting. For the first time ever, I meditated with my eyes just very barely open. And what I noticed was that when my mind, my thinking mind drifted off, took me over, as it were, I'd stopped seeing. I couldn't, my visual went. And so then I'd come back. So I was very aware when I came back into the present moment, but I'm wondering how you know that you're going.
Lovely question. I think the more continuity of awareness you have, in a way, the closer you get to that point where the mind goes, you can see that process happening, and it can be something really interesting to explore. The more but it's a great question, because it points to that there's interest there in that area. So then you take that interest and that question just in the back of your mind into another practice and think, oh, there's a bit more attention already primed to be noticing that particular point of the process. But what you said about seeing, I think, it also points to something really key. It's seeing is, because we're with seeing most of the time, except when we have our eyes shut. It's a good object. It's a good object to notice seeing and then notice when it's not happening. It allows us to build that continuity of awareness through all sorts of things that we otherwise might just get really involved in and lose that. So yeah, if you have a sense of seeing as an object, it's really worth developing.
Okay.
Eric.
Yeah, thank you. You asked a question, you said, that didn't need answering. How do you know you're aware? And without thought, I got one of those possibly useful, possibly unuseful phrases in my head. I know because I know.
Okay, so was there a sort of feeling tone or a sense with that answer?
There was a sense of calmness and a sense of not being able to describe, but actually a feeling associated with being aware. I can't tell you what it was.
Yeah, that's great. That's plenty. It sounds like it was something with some sort of recognition of the mind, of recognizing awareness, or recognizing that it knew awareness. Yeah, and that's great. That's great. Doesn't mean, when I say that, not in a way, it's not to look for an answer, but answer. Sometimes things come up, things do make themselves known, as it were. Yeah.
The other thing I noticed was that awareness went as a story started.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was almost surprised at how quickly it came back. but it did definitely go as the story started. I'm assuming because at the beginning of a story it's interesting. And then,
in a way, yeah, again, something, as with Rachel, something to notice next time. In a way, what does happen? We haven't had time this week to look at my favorite of the poisons, at moha, delusion. But one of the things about the moha is in a way, partly how our world is constructed are through assumptions, and they can be really innocent assumptions, but they're different to the direct experience. So it can be helpful to notice the mind. Oh, okay, so that's an assumption about what might be happening, or what's a possible. What's the actual experience? It can just, if you recognize the assumption, it can just alert you to connect back with the direct experience. Yeah. Thank you.
So Matthew put something in chat.
Matthew, would you like to expand on your question? Because I'm not quite sure. Empty of attachment object here.
Yeah, the state of mindfulness is, for me, there's an element of emptiness of mind. Paradoxically, the sati is the state of emptiness of mind from the disturbance of mind objects or sense field objects, i.e. memories. They can invade me quite a bit if I sit with my eyes closed. So memories becomes the mind object. It's quite subjective when that happens. When I open my eyes, then I'm in the sense field. And I know the difference between attachment to a particular object for a particular reason, part of craving and aversion, etc. But there's something about that same object not having attachment. It's the same object, but it's not got attachment when mindfulness is there. So the mind is empty of attachments.
Yeah.
It's not looking for anything out of the object, any kind of a gratification or papancha around about craving aversion. It's not deluding itself anymore. It's just a clear pond that receives, but does not buy in on. That's what I meant by that statement.
Yeah, no,
the emptiness of mindfulness. Yeah, I know it doesn't sound grammatically clever, but it's that kind of feeling. Yeah,
lovely. That's an important distinction, and maybe you're using attachment where I think previously I've used identification, but I think they amount to the same thing. When there's an identification with an object or attachment to an object, and in a way the observing mind is not sort of clear of that, or the mindfulness is not clear, but when we can really see what's happening, bring out that other side of the lens, you do get that more pure mindfulness that is empty. It's that empty quality, empty in the sense of fullness of its own nature.
Yeah, there's a word that both Punta and Analayo uses, cognitive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand that word, cognitive. It's a German word translated into English, but I think it's something to do with the connection to things that make things arise and fall and translate into emotional responses. That kind of area. But I'm not sure on this one, so I don't like speaking about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. My eyes fell on it in my notebook, one of my quote notebooks yesterday. But so yeah, it's one of those words that I did know what it meant, and at the moment I don't. So maybe we'll leave it there with both of us not quite knowing.
I just don't know what it means as a felt sense.
Yeah,
I know what it means as a dictionary definition, but that's the intellectual. But I don't know what it really means. You know?
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
So
again.
Shall we leave it? Yeah, I've got another question, Satya Nandi question, or any comments about your experience. That's particularly this phase. Question is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't got it clearly formulated, but I noticed as I was connecting with awareness and minds, that there was a sense of somehow being a bit up here, and the lower bits didn't seem to be included. And I had a sense that that's connected with a deep tendency of the mind to be ungrounded and have various problems like not being able to sleep that are connected. So there was a sense of wanting to include the lower down bit, but then wondering if there was a way to do that that was not sort of imposing my will. So I started getting interested in when I'd start to try and make things happen, and when I'd simply notice some bit of the lower bit. So I guess if there's a question, it's around the intersection between this very receptive way of working, which feels really fruitful, and when there's a sense that it might be helpful to have something happening that isn't already happening.
Yeah, great question. I think it's very, very personal to each individual and then their own circumstances. I suppose what we're generally looking to do is to, I think I said it earlier, is cultivate in this very, very receptive way positive qualities of mind. So what's sort of going to what's needed? Maybe it's what's needed, what's helpful in this moment. So in a way, that's sampajanya, which has a touch of insight about it, as Bhante wrote in Living with Awareness. So there's that sense of, okay, what would be helpful now? So it's not that there's passivity in relation to what's happening, but there's an overall sense of trying to I don't like using the word trying, but looking to help create good conditions for awareness, and having that sense of groundedness, embodied awareness is helpful. So at that point, it's like, okay, what's helpful? What's needed? Okay, and then maybe you just let the attention be in the lower body for a while. I mean, because there's no location, mind location. I remember once on retreat in Finland, a long time ago, having the experience of mind very clearly in each of the three sort of major centers. So in the head, throat, in the heart, and very clearly in the lower body, like each was a mind center, if you like. It was a very strong experience of the unpinned down ability of mind, and and the meaninglessness in some ways of location. So maybe one other thing to do, if that feeling of sort of headiness, in a way, watch out for any sense of association, location and association. Okay, so the mind is in the head. It's not going to be as crude as that, but it might be that there's an association when you hear or think to yourself mindfulness, awareness, that there's some imputed that's it, and so just noticing that can have an effect, noticing that idea and the effect that idea has on the overall experience. Can be very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay.
So there's a question from Anjali, and Tarani is also wondering, is this a Q&A or is this just a review?
we are going to have a little break in a minute and then come back, and there'll be time for some of the questions. We'll just have 10 minutes, just enough time to get yourself a drink, have a pee. But we could take your question, Anjali, or your comment if it's in relation to the practice, if it's come out of the practice that we've just done. So that's your call, really. Or you could leave it until after the little break if it's a more general question.
Hi there. I'm happy to have a break and then come back. It is about the practice, so it's up to you.
Okay, let's have a break then. Let's just have 10 minutes. We'll come back 2 minutes past 12, and then we'll have about 20-25 minutes for questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So let's have a bit of time for a few questions. Actually, I have a few questions that came yesterday. So if we maybe start with you, Anjali, and then look at the questions that came in yesterday, and then there's one from Lizzie, and that may be all we have time for. But if you have other questions, do either send an email or write them in the chat, and it may be that there's another time we can get to them. So I just want to leave a few minutes at the end to say a couple of things.
Okay, so hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, this is a quick one, I think. So just looking at in terms of cultivating this practice, and I had this real sense of awareness, I think, following on from your metaphor of the cinema reel. So my awareness is this really like sitting in the back of the projection room and having this all-round sound, multi-sensory experience of awareness. And then you said something around awareness of awareness being enough. There doesn't have to be an object there. So my sense was, oh, okay, so I was just really enjoying dwelling in awareness, which had this felt sense of peace, just this all-round sense of peace. And then different objects would come into that as if projected on the cinema screen. But when you said it's enough to be aware of awareness, I wondered then, as a way to cultivate this practice, is it enough just to dwell in that sense of peace, or however it feels on the day? Or is it useful to actually turn awareness into an objective awareness itself? That makes sense.
Yeah. I think the guiding principle is maybe just to be interested in the experience that's there.
Okay.
I think what I was pointing to in that practice is that we can sort of we generally are more aware of the object side of the equation, if you like, but that we can, in a way, turn the interest to the awareness itself. So like we could use the language of making it an object, or awareness as a happening, as an arising. And what that can do is just if there's a sense of identification with the awareness as me doing it, it can help that we're clearly knowing awareness as awareness, or knowing as knowing. But there can be a whole exploration around that. Sometimes we're just more naturally aware of objects. But when we can, when we can sort of lean back and take in the knowing, take in the awareness as well, it's very helpful. And yeah, okay, forgot.
Okay.
Got to turn my battery on.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So is that going back to the 50-50 awareness that you were saying?
Not at this point, not. In a way, be guided by the interest, but definitely if there aren't that many sense objects, mind objects, then let more attention rest when you can. Let more attention rest with the awareness and an exploration of the awareness, just keeping that sense of it. What's happening now with awareness? What can I know? What can I recognize about awareness and its qualities?
Okay, that's great. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I actually just want to check something that came up in the chat then. Oh, okay, actually it's maybe a little bit long to take in now. So I'm going to just move on to the questions that came in. So there was one about the place of creativity in the practice. This can be very broad. Creativity is a very broad thing, isn't it? But specifically within the practice, well, a couple of things came to my mind. So one of them was the teacher Deepa Ma, who studied a lot in Burma, I think was Indian, and was one of the early teachers for people like Joseph Goldstein and possibly Jack Cornfield. And she talks about the spontaneity which arises when greed and aversion are no longer sort of, if you like, keeping us locked within our habits, keeping us within habitual behavior. Once we're sort of free from habitual sort of desires and discontents, or to the degree that there is freedom from them, then actually there's more creativity. In Bante's language, rather than the reactive mind, we have the creative mind. So definitely sort of creativity in that sense is very much part of the process. It's a process of increasing creativity in terms of response as well. Actually, if we are always responding from our conditioned or sort of preset notions, once we're more established in the moment, and especially with some degree of wisdom there, then yeah, we're much more able to sort of respond appropriately, as well as creativity, to what's needed here, what's actually needed in this moment. But to say something else that came to my mind, this is very much a wisdom practice. That's not to say that it's without compassion, because of course the expression of wisdom is going to be compassion. But I'm just going to tell you a little story I told before. It's about being in the Swiss mountains on retreat with Sayadaw U Tejaniya. And very, very beautiful location, very close to, or across the valley are the three of the highest mountains in Switzerland. So you've got the Eiger, the Jungfrau and the Munch, and they're just there in this big, stunning row of snowy mountains. And we were out for a walk, half a dozen of us with U Tejaniya, and we were sort of, oh, it's so beautiful, oh, it's so beautiful. And he was saying, well, yeah, I was like that. The first time I was here, I was like, yes, it's so beautiful. He said, now I think it's not beautiful, and it's not beautiful. And this has been something I've reflected on for years. It's not beautiful, and they're not beautiful. This, if you like, beauty is a conditioned response. What we find beautiful, we're conditioned to find beautiful. And I think he was pointing to something else, another possibility altogether that can be recognized by the wisdom mind. So this is not taking away from natural beauty in the world, but the possibility that when the mind when the mind opens, when the mind is more free, things are seen in a different way. So that came to my mind just in relation to this place of creativity. I suppose it's a sense of wonder. It's a sense of that there is always more to see, and the glimpses. I think the glimpses we get in practice of a different view, a different perspective, and how that can open things up. In a way, they are what give me faith. They're what give me confidence in and curiosity about what might be possible, what is possible. Yeah, so that's just a couple of responses in relation to the question. It's possible that there were other sort of that question could be taken in a number of different ways, and I'm aware I've just responded in a quite particular way. So, okay, so there was another one about the place of kindness or heart opening in the practice, and the question was saying the language can sound quite cool or quite analytical. Yeah, I think again, interesting question. I think that it's a wisdom practice. It's from the early Buddhist tradition, the Satipatthana tradition. So the language, I think, you read bits of the Pali Canon, and there's quite a lot of negation. There's quite a lot of what enlightenment isn't, what insight isn't. There's that sort of language, and so I think it does come across in a cooler way. But I think I would say it's more observational than analytical. I think there's more. It's about observing what's happening directly, and sometimes that is. Well, a lot of what we observe in terms of our thoughts, in terms of our emotions, contributes to our suffering. So I suppose we are cultivating a way of seeing that doesn't sort of contribute to that suffering. It doesn't buy into it. So there is a certain sort of detachment from defilements. I think I talked about this earlier in the week. But it's not a detachment from life or detachment from it's not. Yeah, what am I trying to say? I suppose I'm saying that the language of allowing and accepting whatever is happening in experience. Personally, I find a great deal of kindness, of openness, and in that degree of acceptance. It's saying that there's nothing denied or nothing wrong in experience, and awareness can be quite tender and quite sensitive to whatever's happening, whatever's arising. So I think actually my own sense that there is, even though there's this the background of the Pali Canon or that particular sorts of language, I think in the experience there is a lot of kindness in that degree of acceptance, degree of allowing. Yeah, that's a very brief thing. Okay. Okay, so the other question I think this came from Tasha, and I think I'll need you to say it, Tasha, if that's all right, because I just have 2 words written down. So I think I need a bit more to go on. I'm sure you wrote more, but that's all I've got written down.
Oh, it was a question when we were talking about volition, and I was wondering about the difference between volition and will, because in ordinary language we use the 2 terms interchangeably, but my understanding is in this practice volition means something more, I'm not quite sure of the words, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with the words, but instinctive, whereas will has maybe more of an effort or a straining toward quality. And I was hoping to just talk to you about that.
Okay, so
it was a couple of days ago, I think, wasn't it, when we were talking about the skandhas.
Yeah, so let's see what I can do.
Sorry to put you on the spot today.
No, not at all, not at all. So in terms of, I was quoting Bhante saying that Chaitana, or will, is almost synonymous with mental formations and karma. But I'm wondering if this question touches on one we had also, I think, yesterday around voluntary and involuntary.
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe also connects with what I was saying this morning about the directed attention that we direct, and attention in receptive practice when we allow the mind to notice where the direction is going. I think it's a really, really big area in terms of how much choice we have, how much control we have over where we direct our will, or where we will. My understanding is that we have this past. We have a lot of past conditioning, and it comes into the present moment, which is where we feel I need to decide to do this or choose to do that, or whatever. Use my will, plot a course of action. I think the decisive factor can be, if you like, the makeup of mental factors in the present moment, making that decision. And usually decisions are a sort of a process that we can't just make it in one moment, but we have to keep, in a way, backing it up, keep deciding to go with that course of action. So in each of those moments, there'll be different mental factors, some of them working towards that goal and some of them pulling away. The more awareness can be one of those factors, and wisdom, looking at in a way, seeing if that's a wise choice or not, then it will have an influence. It will have an influence on supporting a wise will, a directed choice, or trying to sort of mitigate against it. Does that speak to your question, or do you have a further?
No, definitely, and thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Good. So I think there was another one in the chat. Liz. Okay, so my job in finance requires strong mental focus, which I find really hard to bring awareness to, or to have a broader awareness. Do you have any tips? Okay. I think a really helpful thing to look out for with tasks that require strong mental focus is how relaxed we can be while doing them, and keeping an eye on the quality of effort, the quality of energy used. Because often what we do with focus is we automatically apply more energy than we need to. So that the focus becomes quite small, and it's almost like we physically and mentally hunch around that focus. So the body sort of gets in the act. You see it sometimes people working on computers, there isn't a sense of spaciousness, there's a sense of locked in, whereas it's perfectly capable, you know, you can type, you can think, you can do things with attending to one thing, but with a broader sense of relaxation. But I think that looking at the quality of energy or effort being used can really help to doing that. Even once every 5 minutes, or checking your posture, seeing if your posture's putting a lot of energy in there, unnecessary energy, seeing if how that's working mentally. If there's the same sense of a lot of energy being put in, because actually the things that need focus, I think, also benefit from relaxation in the mind. But I think the habit can be to not. I'm sure there's probably a lot more I could say here, but I suspect it's more of the same, really. It's maybe reminding yourself, having something there at your workplace that reminds you to settle back. Maybe every now and then, settle back. What is the mind knowing? Between tasks, if you feel like you need to keep that continuity of attention on the task. But see if you can keep a bit of awareness in there too of the task, if you like, of how you're doing it, but also the detail of the task itself. Yeah, that's what I'm coming up with at the moment. I'm sure there should be a lot more. Mokshika, do you have any thoughts on this area? Feel free to say no.
Not really. Only that you know, that, like I was saying the other day, there is a tendency for awareness to contract around, particularly if we're focusing, and we're used to awareness contract around things that we focus on. So I think for me, it would be to just try and broaden it a little bit when, if I become too intent on something, is just be aware of my body at the same time. So it's a bit more like the and.
Yeah.
Just to spread it so it doesn't collapse, as it were.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. I think we're going to need to leave it there. If there are other questions, do write them, and we might just put a little bit of time aside this afternoon. I'm going to let me just, two things to say. So one is about the groups this afternoon. If you could come at 3:45 as you did on the first day, that would be really great. And then Vajradevi's got plenty of time to put everybody into the same groups that you had on the first day. If for some reason you couldn't join your group on the first day, but you would like to today, yeah, please feel free to do that. And if you haven't been having meditation reviews, and you might have gone to a group on the first day, or you might not have, but again, feel free to, there will be a group for you to join if you would like to. Anybody who would like to, there will be a group. If you want to just tune in with a bunch of people who you've been sharing the retreat with. And so that will also mean that this afternoon session won't start at 5. The groups will finish at 5, and then we'll have a 15-minute period where you're welcome to stay signed on with the Zoom, but just go and have a 15-minute cuppa or something like that. And obviously, if you're not in the groups, then that session, you'll be able to access it from 5 o'clock, but it will start at 5:15. Okay, so I have about 2 minutes to talk a little bit about dana. And I must confess, I've never made a dana appeal on behalf of myself before, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, firstly, I want to just thank you for coming, for giving me the opportunity to communicate teachings that I love and that I've found so incredibly valuable in my own practice. And I also want to thank many of you who've already given, and I feel so grateful, so appreciative of your generosity. So I just wanted to say a little bit about my circumstances. So I live from dana, and I feel very grateful for that as well. It's really just come about in the last few years that I've been able to be more and more supported through teaching in centres and retreat centres. So I don't have other sources of income, but so I have the donations or fees from retreat centres, and I also have a bunch of friends and some people who've been regularly on retreat with me who support me on a monthly basis through standing orders. So I feel very, very fortunate for all that. So this year, all my retreats have, except for one, I think my last retreat was in Dana Kosha in early March before lockdown. And retreats since then have all been cancelled. And it's quite likely that next year, we're getting things together, people who sort of teach at retreat centres and centres getting things together. But one of the things that is likely to happen and has happened with one retreat centre is they're just asking if people like me are able to go and lead the retreat but not take a fee next year. And they're very, very willing to give it if it's necessary. I would love it not to be necessary, and that was part of my motivation for doing this retreat, was just thinking, okay, I might, by asking for dana, I might need not to receive or put retreat centres under more strain, because they are under a lot of strain, and they won't all necessarily survive the lockdown and the virus. So I know a couple of you have found the no suggested donation really a bit tricky, but I really wanted anyone who wanted to come to be able to come and feel free to give whatever you could. So I don't want to say any more than that really, but just thank you for whatever you're able to give, and I'll endeavour to use it wisely, both for myself, for my own needs, and to further the teaching that I'm able to offer to centres and retreat centres. Thank you. And yes, I think it's obvious how to give and where to give. So many of you have found found it either on my blog or on the retreat centre Padlet page. Okay, so let's leave it there. And look forward to seeing you later this afternoon, see you in groups beforehand. And what else do I want to say? Oh, maybe just this evening, if just so you know in advance, I'm going to be leading the Satipatthana Sutta Puja that Vajradevi spontaneously wrote at the end of the Tara Loka retreat. The online Tara Loka retreat I did in June, early July. I think it's really beautiful. As those of you that know Vajradevi will know that she has a very strong connection with nature, and yeah, it really comes across in a way, her love of nature, and yeah, in a way that connection with how the Buddha would have lived at the time of giving the sutta. So we'll be doing that this evening. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.